Hi, I'm Casey Weber, and I'm here to discuss my entire process of our major assignment. I chose to work with the topic of motivation, and I specifically centered this topic on reading comprehension because for me that was always a struggling aspect in my reading journey as a young reader. I wanted to base my inquiry question specifically on the age of fourth grade because for me this was the time that I struggled the most with reading comprehension. Therefore, my actual question for the basic foundation of this assignment was, how can I engage and motivate fourth graders to read? In writing my question, I was not only focusing on the classroom aspect, but also in their outside reading as well, and motivating them to want to read outside of class and not just for school. I found an article called Motivating and Engaging Readers by Jenna Cambria that I think worked really well with this assignment for me because not only did I get the answers that I was kind of looking for, but I found ways that I could tailor my assignments based off of her suggestions in her research. The main three components of the article were centered specifically on how to engage these readers and how to motivate them to want to read. And her suggestions were to build on three areas on interest, dedication, and on confidence. I'm sorry. And so what I did was I took those three components and I centered my entire lesson on them, but broke them down separately so that if I were to truly implement this plan, each day I would focus on one of those three aspects. I chose to work with a text as an example if I were to do this. And the example text that I chose was Harriet the Spy. And the reason why I chose this text was because not only is it a popular fourth grade read, but it works really well in focusing on these three areas to hopefully get students engaged. In focusing on those three major components, I would first break down the interest aspect. I would want to do something that would capture their interest in not only the text, but on a personal level as well, to help with that engagement and to motivate them to want to actually read the book itself. So what I did was I said that if I were to actually teach this text, I would have students do a pre-anticipatory guide that would draw in their interest and draw themselves to the major character prior to even knowing or being introduced to her. And in doing that, I would have them journal something very personal in their lives, a secret or something that they're ashamed of or that they're afraid of. And I would have them, take 10 minutes or so to write about that in their journal. And then I would tell them that it would remain private and that I would not read it and they would not have to share if they didn't like. And then afterwards, I would discuss with them how they would feel if that were to get around the school, if it were to be published in the school yearbook, and if people were to make fun of them based off of their, writing. And in doing that, it would connect them and have them understand how Harriet feels in the text when her journal and private personal experiences are exposed to her friends. From there, I would then focus on the dedication aspect of the book. Now that I feel that they're probably a little bit more engaged and personally connected to the text, I would hope that from there I can show them that it's important for them to dedicate themselves to reading the novel from here on out. So in doing that, I would work a lot with annotation. And when I tell them to annotate, I don't necessarily mean that I would have them write on the margins certain questions that they may have or words that they are unfamiliar with. Instead, I would want them to focus on their actual thought process. I would want them to, synthesize throughout the text and to journal how they feel in relation to what they're reading. So I would suggest to them to use, smiley faces in the margins or a sad face and to be able to explain how they feel and why they feel that way, as well as underlining words that they're unfamiliar with or circling important sentences or highlighting important parts of the text. From there, I would hope that they would see that they are placing a direct emphasis on trying to decode the words as well as the meaning and reading between the lines. In doing this, they are, again, engaged and connecting to the text. In my third aspect of a lesson, which would, obviously be done on a separate day, I would have them silently read to themselves. And this would be for the dedication, or not the dedication, the confidence aspect. So we went through interest and dedication, and now the last aspect is their confidence. So I'd have them read the text independently, and from there I would ask them to get with a partner. And with a partner, I would have them work on some sort of therapy session with the text. I would have them role play, and one partner would be the therapist, and then they would switch sides, and the other person would be the therapist. And in being the therapist of the text, they would ask students questions such as, how did you feel about this chapter? And, how is this character, making you feel as the reader? And if you were in the text, how would you feel in her shoes? Were there any aspects of the chapter that confused you, or that made you angry, or that you don't feel belonged in the chapter, or do you wish the chapter had gone a separate, direction, or anything that it's going to get them thinking on that critical level. And I would have sample questions on the board. And from there, I would hope that, as partners, they would want to come together with the rest of the class and be able to explain together how they actually reacted to the individual chapter. And in doing this, I feel like some questions that normally wouldn't come about in a group setting will rise, because they will feel that together they're asking the question, opposed to, being singled out with something if they were to feel that it was, an unnecessary question or a silly question. And that way they can, directly ask the class as a group, or talk about the class as a group. And I would also model here some questions of my own, and I would bring myself to their level. And, even if I were just to say, hey, I also, thought that too before I continued to read, or I was confused with this word as well, just so that I can open up that environment for them to realize that I'm learning, with them, and that we're all together on this journey. And hopefully that will help them to build a sense of their own confidence, as well as the sense of comfort in the class, which I think would work to improve the dedication and the interest of the text as well. Overall, in implementing this fake plan, I learned the process. I learned how to plan a lesson in a different order than I normally would, because prior to this, I would normally, write up a lesson plan and then look for an outside text or an outside article or something to help support my original thoughts and to serve as an example for a class. But in doing it reverse and finding the actual research itself, my lesson was based off of that research. And I think that's a prime example of teachers sharing, materials amongst themselves as well as other teachers, putting it on the internet, and opening that communication, which I think is a great thing. And in doing my lesson plan backwards, by finding the research first and then basing my lesson plan specifically tailored on the evidence that Cambria came up with, I feel that my lesson was more focused and, more directed to exactly what I was hoping my students would be able to do. And it would keep me, on track. And in doing that, I think the overall process would be really smooth. I think the process of going about this major assignment went really smooth. Everything seemed to fall into place once I found what I wanted to base my lessons on. And in critiquing the article, I actually learned a lot about myself as not only an educator, but as a reader, and how I would take the information and how I would, use some sort of foundation of a study to be able to form my own hypothesis and my own lesson plans and my own goals, and hoping to bring my students to where I would like them to be. So it was a whole unique process of developing a lesson in a way that I normally would not think about going and doing. And I overall think it was a pretty successful journey. All right, thanks.